Jack Dempsey grew up so broke that he'd fight anyone, anywhere, for the price of a meal.
In the case we have here, Jack Dempsey is a very, very vicious man. And as you see, he fights like someone hasn't eaten for 5 days. Oh man, I'm crazy about Jack Dempsey because of this ferocious intensity. There's no one like him.
This man once said you could hit him in the face with a hammer for $5. He wasn't joking. He was starving. He learned to box in mining camps and saloons, sleeping in boxcars, with nothing but hunger driving his fists.
Next time he'd look for a place that had a club fight going on, and he would fight, get his money, and then be able to get a room for the night and food, and then go on to the next.
But when this hobo finally clawed his way to a heavyweight title shot, he didn't just win. He committed murder in broad daylight.
And the impossible has happened again. Big Jess has lasted through another murderous round with this roaring Dempsey.
On July 4th, 1919, in front of 20,000 screaming fans, Jack Dempsey turned the 6'6" champion Jess Willard's face into hamburger meat, knocking him down 7 times in the first round alone. The beating was so savage that grown men in the crowd started crying. Willard never fought again. But that was just the beginning. For the next decade, Dempsey would rewrite the rules of violence, create the first $1 million gates, and show the world what happens when pure animal fury meets boxing glove. This is the story of the Manasseh Mauler, the most vicious puncher who ever lived, the hungry savage who turned boxing from a gentleman's sport into a blood spectacle, and the beast who proved that sometimes the only thing that matters is who hits harder. If you think modern fighters are tough, you've never seen what Jack Dempsey did to his enemies. And once you do, you'll understand why they say the ghost of his violence still haunts every boxing ring in the world. Jack Dempsey wasn't born a boxer. He was born hungry. And hunger makes men do terrible things. William Harrison Dempsey entered this world in 1895 in a dirt-poor Colorado town called Manasseh, the youngest of 11 kids in a Mormon family that had more mouths than money. By age 16, Jack had seen enough poverty to last 10 lifetimes. So he walked away from everything he knew with nothing but the clothes on his back and fists that hadn't learned mercy yet. The American West in 1911 was a brutal place for a teenage drifter. Jack survived by following the mining camps, railroad crews, and lumber yards, anywhere desperate men gathered to break their backs for pennies. But Jack had discovered something these hardened workers would pay to see: pure violence. In every town there was always some local tough guy who thought he owned the place. Jack would find him, challenge him, and beat him bloody in front of whoever wanted to watch. $1 here, $2 there, just enough to eat and move on to the next town. He called himself Kid Blackie in those early days, fighting on dirt floors in saloons where the only rules were stay standing and make it hurt. No gloves, no referees, no mercy. These weren't boxing matches, they were survival contests. And Jack learned that when you're smaller than your opponent, you better get close fast and never stop hitting. He developed his signature crouch not from any trainer's wisdom, but from necessity. Bigger men couldn't hit what they couldn't catch. And while they were swinging at air, Jack was inside their guard, unleashing hell on their ribs and liver. Every beating he took made him meaner. Every dollar he earned kept the dream alive. By 1918, something had changed in Jack Dempsey's eyes. He wasn't fighting for money anymore. He was fighting to hurt people, and that made him the most dangerous man in American boxing. The hobo circuit had forged a weapon. Now it was time to see what that weapon could destroy. Then came July 4th, 1919. The day America met the monster it had created. Jess Willard was everything Jack Dempsey wasn't. 6'6", 245 pounds of Kansas farm muscle, with arms that reached halfway across the ring. They called him the Potawatomi Giant, and he'd won the heavyweight title by doing what nobody thought possible: outlasting Jack Johnson in the Cuban heat. Willard was gentle outside the ring, almost apologetic about his size. But inside those ropes, he was an immovable mountain of flesh and bone. He'd never been hurt, never been dropped, never even been staggered. Most fighters took one look at Willard and started planning their retirement. Jack Dempsey took one look and started planning a funeral. Toledo, Ohio, Independence Day, 103 degrees of suffocating heat with 19,500 bloodthirsty fans packed into a makeshift arena. The smart money was all on Willard. How could this 6-foot 1-inch, 190-pound drifter possibly hurt a giant who'd absorbed everything Jack Johnson could throw? The answer came 30 seconds into round 1. Dempsey exploded from his corner like a rabid animal. No feeling out process, no cautious jabs, just pure, calculated violence. He slipped under Willard's long jab and unleashed what would become known as the Dempsey roll. Left hook to the body, right hand to the head, pivot left, repeat. But this wasn't arm punching. Every shot came from his feet, through his legs, up his spine, and exploded through his fists with the force of a sledgehammer. Willard went down like a felled tree. The crowd gasped. Champions don't fall in 30 seconds. But Jess got up, confused and bleeding. Dempsey was waiting. Another combination, another knockdown. Up again, down again. 7 times in 3 minutes, Jess Willard crashed to the canvas. 7 times he hauled his broken body upright. And 7 times Jack Dempsey proved that size means nothing when hunger meets technique. The worst part wasn't the knockdowns, it was what happened between them. In 1919, there was no neutral corner rule. When Willard fell, Dempsey didn't retreat to a corner. He stood over his fallen prey like a predator, daring the giant to rise so he could knock him down again. The referee would push Dempsey away, help Willard up, and immediately step aside as the mauling resumed. By the end of round 1, Willard's face looked like raw meat. His left eye was swollen shut, his nose was spread across his cheek, and blood was pouring from cuts that would require dozens of stitches. But champions don't quit. Willard stumbled out for round 2, where Dempsey methodically broke down what was left of the giant's defenses. Body shots that folded Willard in half. Uppercuts that snapped his head back like a whip. The crowd had gone from cheering to silent horror. Round 3 was pure butchery. Willard couldn't see, couldn't breathe, couldn't defend himself. He was a 245-pound punching bag, being demolished by a man half his size. When his corner finally threw in the towel, Jess Willard sat on his stool and did something no heavyweight champion had ever done in public. He cried. Through the blood and swelling, the Potawatomi giant wept like a child, muttering that he was done, he was finished, he never wanted to see another boxing ring. Jack Dempsey had become heavyweight champion, but more than that, he'd shown the world what boxing could be when technique met savagery. The gentle sport of gentlemen was dead. The age of violence had begun. Jack Dempsey had become heavyweight champion. Now, he had to prove he was more than just a lucky savage. The doubters came out immediately. Sure, Dempsey had destroyed Willard, but what would happen when Jack faced a real boxer? The answer came in the form of Georges Carpentier, and it would change boxing forever. Carpentier was everything Dempsey wasn't. Handsome, educated, a decorated French war hero they called the Orchid Man. At light heavyweight, he'd never lost. His right hand was lightning. His footwork was poetry. He was moving up to heavyweight for one reason: to civilize the savage who had embarrassed American boxing. July 2nd, 1921. Boyle's 30 acres. The first $1 million gate in boxing history. 90,000 people paying fortunes to watch Europe's finest boxer tame America's most dangerous man. This wasn't just a fight. This was a cultural war. For 3 rounds, Carpentier put on a clinic. His jab was surgical, keeping Dempsey at bay while he peppered the champion with combinations that would have stopped most heavyweights. The Frenchman was faster, smoother, more technically sound. But there was one problem Georges hadn't counted on. Jack Dempsey didn't care about getting hit. Every jab brought Dempsey closer. Every combination only made him hungrier. By round 4, Jack had solved the puzzle. He cut off the ring like a wolf herding sheep, eliminating Carpentier's escape routes, until the elegant Frenchman was trapped with nowhere to run. Then Dempsey went to work. Body shots that sank deep, short hooks that rattled brains. The knockout came fast. A perfect right hand that sent Carpentier crashing unconscious. The Orchid Man was wilted. Boxing wasn't just sport anymore, it was big business, entertainment. But if Carpentier was Dempsey's coming out party, Louis-Angel Firpo was his masterpiece of mayhem. September 14th, 1923, the Polo Grounds. Firpo was the wild bull of the Pampas, 6'2", 220 pounds of Argentine fury, who'd knocked out 27 men. This wouldn't be David versus Goliath. This would be monster versus monster. What happened next was the wildest 4 minutes in boxing history. Round 1 started like a street fight. No tactics, just two bulls colliding. Firpo swung wild haymakers. Dempsey slipped under and dropped him immediately. But Firpo wasn't Willard or Carpentier. He was a savage just like Jack. In 3 minutes, these men hit the canvas 9 times between them. 7 for Firpo, 2 for Dempsey. Then came the 8th knockdown. Firpo caught Dempsey with a wild right that launched the champion clean out of the ring, over the ropes, into the laps of ringside reporters. For a moment, the heavyweight champion of the world was sitting on a typewriter, looking up at 80,000 stunned faces. Any normal man would have been counted out. Jack Dempsey climbed back through the ropes like a man possessed. The fall hadn't hurt him, it had awakened something primal and terrible. He stalked Firpo with murder in his eyes. When he cornered the exhausted Argentine, the beating was swift and final. Left hook to the body, right uppercut, final left hook. Firpo crashed unconscious and stayed there. 2 rounds, 11 knockdowns. Pure violence that left both men destroyed. For 7 years after that, nobody could touch Jack Dempsey. He wasn't just the best boxer in the world. He was the most dangerous human being alive, until he met a man who refused to fight him. Gene Tunney was everything Jack Dempsey hated. Smart, patient, disciplined, and completely unafraid of the Manasseh Mauler. The fighting Marine had studied Dempsey like a science project. While other heavyweights tried to outmuscle Jack, Tunney understood the secret. You can't fight fire with fire. You fight it with water. He'd found the flaw no one else had seen. Jack was a rhythm fighter. Disrupt his rhythm, neutralize his power. September 23, 1926, Philadelphia. 120,000 people expecting to watch Gene Tunney get mauled. Instead, they witnessed a boxing lesson that rewrote the sport. For 10 rounds, Tunney gave Dempsey a masterclass in hit and don't get hit. Every time Jack charged with that devastating crouch, Gene stepped aside and peppered him with jabs. The pressure that had broken Willard, Carpentier, and Firpo was hitting nothing but air. By the final bell, Dempsey was bleeding, swollen, and beaten. America's most dangerous man looked old and helpless. Gene Tunney was the new heavyweight champion. The unthinkable had happened, but Jack Dempsey wasn't done. 1 year later, Chicago's Soldier Field. 104,000 people, for what everyone knew would be the former champion's last stand. The long count fight. For 6 rounds, it was the same story. Tunney boxing, Dempsey chasing. Then came round 7. Dempsey caught Tunney in the corner and unleashed a vintage combination. Left hook, right hand, another left that sent Tunney crashing to the canvas. The crowd exploded. Jack was 30 seconds from reclaiming his throne, but Jack made the mistake that defined his career. Instead of walking to a neutral corner, Dempsey stood over his fallen opponent like he always had. The referee refused to start counting until Jack moved. Precious seconds ticked by. By the time the official count began, Tunney had been down for 14 seconds. At 9, Gene rose. Those extra seconds had cleared his head and steadied his legs. For 3 more rounds, he boxed Dempsey's ears off. When the final bell rang, Tunney was still champion. Jack Dempsey's gloves came off that night forever. The thinking man had conquered pure violence through patience and 14 controversial seconds. The era of the Manasseh Mauler was over, but the beast inside Jack Dempsey was just getting started. Most fighters fade into obscurity. Jack Dempsey became more dangerous. He refused the trilogy with Tunney, walking away on his own terms while he could still destroy men. But retirement didn't calm the beast. It unleashed it. In his 40s, a cocky pro wrestler called out the former champion during a restaurant appearance. Bad mistake. Dempsey mauled him in front of terrified diners, proving that age hadn't dulled his killer instinct. The wrestler never wrestled again. There are stories of 70-year-old Jack Dempsey laying out 2 muggers in a New York alley. Police found them unconscious. Jack was back at dinner like nothing happened. When reporters asked about it, he just smiled and said, "They picked the wrong old man." Even reuniting with Jess Willard decades later for a friendly photo op, Jack couldn't help himself. As they shook hands, he threw a playful punch toward Willard's chin. The old giant flinched like he'd seen a ghost. Some wounds never heal. Mike Tyson studied Dempsey's film. Rocky Marciano copied his crouch. Every swarmer, every pressure fighter, every boxer who ever decided to walk through hell to get close, they're all Jack Dempsey's children. Jack Dempsey didn't just change boxing, he revealed what boxing really was. Not a sport, not entertainment, but the most honest expression of human violence ever invented. Every great knockout, every brutal finish, every moment when boxing shows its savage heart, that's Jack Dempsey's ghost, still throwing leather with bad intentions. He was the Menacea Mauler, the hungry hobo who became immortal, and somewhere in every fighter's DNA, the beast he unleashed is still prowling, waiting for its moment to strike.